When Melanie asked me to do this gig, my first question was, what do we need to talk about that for? Social value in local authority procurement. I'm a provider of services. As Mel normally does, she feels in full confidence, you'll be all right. The first thing I did, I went onto Google. I thought I'll get the latest thing on social value procurement. Top of the list, the graph of doom. Everybody know what I mean? Yeah. Public spending going that way, all the people going that way will be all finished by 2020. And then I come here and Chris talks about it being uninteresting, boring. Procurement's not boring. I was thinking, what am I going to do to get that beyond that part that Chris filled in? And I thought, who are the procurers in the room?
All up on
and I thought I just wanted to give you an example of somebody that we care for. He's now in his early 50s, but had spent 30 years of his adult life in secure long-stay hospital and other institutions. A guy with a learning disability, but an absolutely lovely personality. When he arrived with us, he had 2 fleecy tracksuits and a pair of green flash pumps. That was it. 30 years in institutional care, that's all he cared. 10 years on, he's now dressed head to foot in Gucci, got his own lease car, and will only go to the Caribbean on his holidays. That started with good public procurement. It may well seem very boring and uninteresting. And unfortunately, for people like you who just put your hands up, it's people like us that get the glory for it. Look at what we've done for Geoff. But it started with you, and we should never forget that, and neither should you, because you're a really important part. We can't do that unless you get your bit right. So procurement isn't boring. It isn't something that's of no interest. It's absolutely critical to transforming people's lives. And social value, for me, isn't separate from ordinary value, good value, and transforming lives. They're not mutually exclusive. In the current climate of austerity, we've got to try and do all those 3 things. And I thought Chris summed it up, we've got to find a way to get the best out of the public pound. And if we're going to achieve that, social value needs to be at the heart of procurement. And I noticed he also said, for procurers, the feedback he gets is that putting social value in there is difficult. It's a hard thing to do. Well, I'll take some of that responsibility, and the other people who didn't put that in should take responsibility for that. Because you can't do social value procurement if you haven't got any providers out there, or if you haven't got enough providers out there. And the trick is, how do we develop that part of the sector? As I said, I work for Sandwell Community Caring Trust. We're a company limited by guarantee and a registered charity. And we've been around since 1997. But it was about 8 years ago somebody came up to us and went, "Oh, you're a social enterprise." And we went, what's a social enterprise? And how that movement has grown and grown until we're filling a room like this at Solihull Council. The current economic climate for health and social care is exactly what led to our creation in 1997. That was the last time that public spending was under really severe pressure. And in my own borough of Sandwell, we lost 25% of our health and social care budget. And whilst we started by reducing services and changing things that people didn't really miss, towards the end, we were getting rid of highly valued services that, more importantly, were never going to come back once they'd been lost. So we tried to think of solutions that were going to deliver better value, develop a better range and quality of services for the people we cared for, but also provided long-term sustainable employment for those people like me, who at the time felt really badly done to. We were going to have to leave the council after 20 years of working in local government. And I think if we look around the room at all the procurement, all the councils, all the health authorities, the PCTs, the CCGs, Those three things still ring true. The problems that we face today are exactly what we faced in 1997. The good news is the solutions are the same. We just have to step up to the plate on both sides of this divide, the procurers and the providers, to actually start to make it happen. And I think probably one of the reasons I'm here is we have been doing this for 17 years. Because quite often I hear the first question that was asked of a provider that's spun out is, what happens when you lose your first contract? Well, we've lost loads of contracts. The trick is we've developed lots of others. In the last 18 months, because of the austerity, we have lost £1.5 million worth of income. It doesn't make it unsustainable. Because we've grown £3 million on the other side. We've stopped doing things that people don't want to buy and actually made that transition into delivering other services that we haven't done before. We care for 700 people now, people with learning disabilities, mental health problems, older people with dementia. We employ 650 care workers and we turn over about £14.5 million. And that has come from 62 people, that transition over that period of time. And that's been done by 3 or 4 TUPE transfers. And one of the things I want to get across to the people who didn't put their hands up, TUPE from Local Authority Procurement conditions isn't the thing that makes you unsustainable. TUPE of paying conditions and pension, which everybody says is not sustainable, it's just not true. But we have to do things differently. And some of the things I might talk about today, to my former local authority colleagues, might seem critical. They're not meant to be. Yeah? We operate in a completely different context to each other. For 20 years, I was restricted in the way that you would all be, in making the changes that we all know that might be a benefit. I'm now in the privileged position of being on the outside and being able to do something better. And it's how we work together to make that happen. Because I'm not asking anybody in here, and I know Alan spoke about it, to change your values and principles. Hang on to them for grim death. Yeah? I still carry my public service values with me. That's what it's all about. But we have to think creatively about how we do change things. And surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, economic crisis makes people creative, doesn't it? I wish we didn't have to wait for economic crisis to become creative, but that's generally what drives innovation and change. So, and I want to try and separate out this privileged position that I'm in, that I didn't used to be in for 20 years. I now deliver a public service. And it wasn't until I started doing that I realised I'd always gone public sector, public service, and used it interchangeably, as if it was the same thing. It's become clear to me now that what I used to deliver before was the public sector, which is a public service wrapped up in all sorts of things that aren't about delivering that service. And that's what holds us back and stops us achieving. So we have to find some way of working together to get those values that we all share across into the market. When we first started, that whole growth from 62 people to 700 and from less than 1 million to 14,000 has purely been about quality of care. We have focused absolutely relentlessly on the 700 people we look after and their families, because they're an important part. That has become absolutely everything we do. And if we do that, and listen to the providers in the room, we will be a success. You can't fail. All the changes that have been brought in, individualised budgets and direct payments, if you deliver a high quality service, people will come and buy it. It doesn't have to be a threat. But what we realised early on, which coming from a local authority was difficult, was that if we wanted people treated with respect and with dignity, have their skills maximised, and heaven forbid be happy and feel good about themselves, we had to do that for the workforce. Because there's such a clear link between how we feel about ourselves individually and collectively, and how we go out there and make other people feel. I've got a great job. I've got to make 1,400 people happy. It's a great job description. Because if I can say that, everything else pales into insignificance. It must be okay, it must be all right. I don't have to have lots of management targets measuring all of that, as long as I've got a group of people who are happy. I could never have got away with that in the local authority, which is why we need to work in partnership so we can have some of the benefits of that not less regulated, we're still very heavily regulated. Okay? But some of the good things that we experience on the outside. But people don't, and social value, what's that all about? As an organisation, I try to make as big a profit as I possibly can every year, because I've then got more money to spend on helping other vulnerable people. Yeah? A couple of examples of that. The procurement people in the room, if I came to you and said, will you give me £88 a week to buy piano lessons? You laugh at me, I presume, and you wouldn't buy it. With the money that we generate, there was an arts therapy group that worked with people with dementia, incredibly highly valued. Everybody wanted it, the council, the health authority wanted it. It was going to go because there was no money. We picked up the funding for that. That project, and if I give you an example, we did drama, creative writing, painting, ceramic, music. And the one I'll talk to you about is music. And this guy looked after his wife at home. He had absolutely no services from the local authority, nor did he want it. He saw it as being his responsibility to look after the woman he loved, and that he'd lived with for over 50 years. The thing when we spoke to him that dementia had done for him, he didn't mind the personal care, the feeding, the sleepless nights. It meant he had nothing in common with the woman he loved anymore, which had just created that huge barrier. And he got absolutely no support, but didn't want to help him. Having spoken to him, we actually put him and his wife in a music studio with a music teacher. And we did that because he used to be a concert pianist. Now, you don't get too many of them from Smelly. He played with Maria Callas, he played all over the world. And she was a music teacher, and their passion was the piano. And we put him in this room so that he could play the piano to him. She doesn't know his name, but from the middle of nowhere, she started to play a duet. Christ, could she play a duet? And the more he played, the more she kept going. That now sustains him at home, caring for his wife 24 hours a day without a penny of public money. It would cost at least £600. If he breaks down, it would cost £600. Public procurement, £88, £600. Which would you prefer? This, but you'll have to buy that because you can't buy that. These are the dilemmas that we're all in. That's the kind of social value that you get from purchasing from a social enterprise. There are people in the private sector who do an absolutely fantastic job, don't get me wrong. They compete on price, yeah, and they deliver a good service. But you must know that for every £1,000 you give them, 300 of it disappears out of the health and social care economy to shareholders and owners. That can't be right at the time that we have no money. Now, I don't blame you because there aren't enough of me in my organisation giving you that option. But we can't afford for 30% to just keep disappearing. Yeah? That 30% to us means that when we TUPE people from the council, as part of spinners, we don't have to slash their paying conditions. We don't have to get rid of their pension. 17 years on, I'm still in the local government pension scheme. We're admitted into the local government pension scheme and the NHS pension scheme. It's not paying conditions and that make it unsustainable. It's the 30% that you've got to take out that means that we can't afford that. And paying people well and giving them a good pension and a career, it's all about delivering an excellent quality service. When I talk to people about high quality services, they talk about reliability and consistency. They want to know who's coming to look after them, when they're going to come, how long will they stop for. Will I know them long enough to get to like them? Will I know them long enough to get to they'll love me? Now there's something we've professionalised out of it, isn't it? Loving the people that we care for. But for an awful lot of the people we look after around the room, there ain't anybody else. If we don't do it, they've got that hole in their life. Maslow's hierarchy of need, is it? Yeah? We all sit there writing fantastic care plans going up to a conical. If there's a big brick missing at the bottom, called love and human relationship, you can have the most complex care plan like it ain't going to work. We can get back to taking some of that and trying to fill that hole down at the bottom. And I've lost my thread. Why did I talk about that? What was I saying?
We're going to talk a bit about that 30-20%.
Right, yeah, that 30%. We're talking about 30%. So not only can it pay people well and reward good people well, so you lock them in. You lock them into your organisation. People are just in our organisation for over 50% of the organisation are there after 10 years. That's unheard of in the care profession, which is an incredibly transient population. But it's how we use that 30% that makes it attractive. Nobody in our organisation earns less than the living wage. Health and social care, if we're not careful, some of the care you're procuring is becoming a minimum wage profession. Is that what we aspire to? Is that what we aspire to for me? I'm next. Yeah? We've got to get this right. We've got to stop wasting that 30% and make sure it starts to deliver some piano lessons. And make sure that it starts to deliver good paying conditions for people. Because that's social value. It builds out into the anti-poverty strategy of the council, doesn't it? You know, all the people that work for us, they're not on pension credit, they're not on credits and this, that and the other. They're not claiming housing benefit, they pay their council tax. These then things feed out. 85% of that £14.5 million that we get in procurement goes straight out in wages to people, local people that spend that in the local economy. There's some clever calculation in terms of anti-poverty that for every pound you put into drop into Sandwell in terms of wages, it will have 7 times the value. Because they'll spend it, somebody else will spend it, somebody else will spend it. It's a bit like cancer or measles. We have to start to operate in a way that locks that in. Not just into health and social care, but into the wider economy. But don't get me wrong, people don't buy things from us because we're nice people doing nice things. Right? They buy it primarily because we compete on price. And I'll just give you an example of the last cheaping transfer that we did in Sandwell. Sandwell were going to close 120 beds of dementia care 3 years ago as part of the austerity drive because they couldn't afford it. It was costing them to keep providing it £730 per week per bed space. And closing the 3 care homes would save them £1.5 million. We happened to overhear a conversation in a lift that we weren't, because it wasn't public knowledge at the time. Why are you going to close 3 care homes? We haven't got enough as it is. Graffa-do. Those 120 people would have all been split up, the staff were going to be made redundant. We stepped in, we saved them the £1.5 million, kept the 120 people and their families together, created or kept the jobs for all the people who TP'd out of the local authority, they're still all in the pension scheme. And we took the price from £730, £33 a week to the 4 to 8, which is the standard fee that they pay every month. Why wouldn't we want to do that? What was it? If I hadn't heard that conversation in the lift, think of what would have happened. The plan now is to close those 3 care homes because they're not fit for purpose. That was the other problem. The council had no money to provide. We've already built one brand new one, all singing and dancing. We've closed 2 of them down, moved people in, spent £4.5 million on that, and we've got planning permission for the second one. And in 30 years' time, because the procurement was right, the land and the properties revert back to the council, so they've not given away the family silver. It's a win-win all round, isn't it? The families and the people all stayed together, the people have kept their employment. In fact, I'm lying, I didn't make every worker happy. I went into the first meeting thinking, I'm going to be received as some kind of and the first woman stood up and went, "You've got in the way of me taking my redundancy. I was planning to buy a flat in Spain." So we had to come to an arrangement for all those people who, quite rightly, half a dozen people have gone out and bought places in Spain. But you can do all of that. You can genuinely start to make everybody happy. And everybody says to me, you can't possibly go from 7:30 to 4 to 8, keep end conditions the same with pension. And for 20 years I would have thought the same. And savings in public service generally means stopping doing something. We don't have to stop doing it, we just have to do it differently. And we've kind of like got a dozen things that whenever we take a tip, make us financially sustainable, and we focus on them relentlessly. And I'm sure, I met somebody from Hereford, are you still here? Yeah? I'm sure what goes on in rural Hereford and what goes on in Sandwell will be completely different. Some of these 12 things, though, will be common. And if they're not, we'll find out what your drivers will be within an hour. Right? And then we focus on them. Because that gap is bridged by, top of the list, sick leave. When we left the council 17 years ago, every one of our workers, including me, on average, had 22 days off sick over a month. Right? And everybody goes, and I suddenly realised, when I was in the council, it was always given to me as a percentage. You know, your sick leave is 2.9%, great. Percent 15, great, because I didn't know what it meant. You turn it into days each, it means something, doesn't it? That has a cathartic effect on the workforce. Because I've still got the same very generous sick pay scheme that you've got. We just cherish it now. We don't take advantage of it. We really appreciate what it offers to us in terms of that security. People said to me at the beginning, you'll solve the sick pay, get rid of the occupational sick pay scheme. Well, if you're terminally ill with cancer or something, you don't want to be worrying about how you're going to pay your mortgage, do you? So we decided to keep it and do the harder thing, which was change people's view of it. For the last 8 years now, same job, same sickness monitoring scheme, same sick pay scheme, it's been less than a day each. This year it's gone up slightly to 0.7 of a day each. If you go, in the last transfer in April 2012 from the 3 carriers, obviously inflation's taken over because it was 35 days on average. Now we can run a service, never mind a value for money reliable with 35 day service. And trust me, it's not unusual. Sick leave costs the public service £6 billion a year. Think what we could do with that. In an average elderly person's room, if you go from 35 days to 0.7 of a day, it will save between £300,000 and £500,000 a year. The difference being, you know, if you've got your own staff covering it or it's agency staff, we're about 22 quid. Don't tell me it's not affordable. We just have to stop sick leave. The interesting thing was, I spent 18 months trying to work out why people were so poorly. Before I realised they weren't ill. They were badly led, they were poorly managed, they didn't know what they were doing, they hadn't bought into the other. As soon as we started to address those things, I'll change it around, as soon as I started to address me, sickness fell off a cliff. £500,000 a year. Management and admin went from 22% of everything we did, delivered nothing to the people we looked after. That's 6%. Turnover used to be over 30%. Staff in and out, retraining, which I said to you, people are with us minimum 10 years now. So it's 4%. And we can carry on with this. The upshot is 65% of what we used to get in procurement made a difference to the people we looked after. That's now 87% plus. This isn't about doing it cheaper, but it's about not wasting money over here where it adds absolutely no value at all, and trying to get it onto the other side. All the savings that we've made, the 730 to the 428, I've never once said to a manager, I need to make a 10% saving in your budget. It's come as a nice side effect of treating people differently, giving them that responsibility, making them responsible for the people who they look after. And people do want that. But the hardest part of that whole transition was for me, because I'd had 20 years of devising systems and strategies that allowed me to think, no matter how far I went up the greasy pole, I actually controlled what went on in it. A, I didn't, and B, I was wasting a lot of time and money. Now I have to trust people. And it's the hardest game in the world, isn't it? Trusting people. People from procurement have to trust people like me, I have to go and trust people. But we have to find, if we're going to solve some of the huge issues we've got, underneath it all is how we trust each other and how we communicate and how we work together to achieve some of the things that are beyond your gift because you're public servants, that you can buy from people like us, that will then have those financial benefits in pure cash terms, £1.5 million, but also in £88 piano lessons. So I've got a list of them here. You know, a lymph care unit. It's a pity Andy's not here, but he'll blow his trumpet for it. He's the head of our CCG. In Sandwell, if you'd had cancer, particularly breast cancer, and you'd come through your acute treatment, you used to have to go to Lichfield to get your follow-up treatment, and that treatment was in hospice. All the people who went to that felt incredibly guilty when they said, we don't want to go to Lichfield from Sandwell, that's it, depending on their cost. But they didn't want their treatment in hospice. They felt incredibly sorry for the people at hospice, that they were in recovery. And it was a completely different mindset. The minute we took that service on, and we put it on the 9th floor of a hotel, where you could be coming for anything to alcohol, it is absolutely knocked out with people coming for treatment and counselling, bringing their family members. We can change things. We have to create some money to be able to do that, because they didn't have the money to pay Lichfield and do us, and the usual, how do you get it out of your keep and put it into them? Somebody has to create that money, don't they, that first year to change it. If we work together, we can do that.